Boston Schools Superintendent Brenda Cassellius recently came out with a draft of her 5-year strategic plan. Overlapping with that effort is another one started last year to examine the state of the school system, from the achievement gap to facilities and the level of diversity among teachers. Joining us for a closer look at facilities is a Parent Advisory Board member from SchoolFacts Boston, Vernée Wilkinson. Thank you very much for being with us, Vernée.
Thank you.
I know this is one topic in a series, but when I looked into this about facilities, there were some things that maybe I heard before, but I really didn't notice as much. And I guess the big message for me was how little of the needs are being addressed, even in what I thought was an ambitious plan.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, when you hear numbers, anything kind of overlapping with the billions, you're like, oh, that should cover it. So within the past 3 years, the city announced and allocated $1 billion towards facilities for Boston Public Schools. And that was to be spent over a period of 10 years. At this point, we're 3 years into that plan, and already half of it has been spent. And the most recent assessment of Boston Public Schools and facility needs is actually $3 billion of needed repairs. So the numbers just aren't adding up, and students are going to school day after day with facilities and resources that are subpar.
I've been in a number of school buildings in my time, including when I was a student, and there's some things I found unattractive, but I just thought of them is normal, but these days, when we've got all these parents leaving the city when their kids are 5 years old, what do you think they must be thinking?
I think a lot of parents, some advice from some parents that had school-age children years ahead of my children, they kind of told us to take the school process as a family 1 year at a time, and that whole idea didn't make any sense to me. Like, you think you kind of show up to kindergarten and pack the lunchbox and take the pictures, and that you'll be set for maybe 5 years, 6 years, and then go on to middle school and that sort of thing. But the idea of having to reassess like 1 year at a time and say, is this still working for us? And if it isn't, do we have other options? And maybe in some cases you do have other options, but unfortunately there's many parents and many students and many children that don't have other options. And so they're in a system that's not serving them appropriately.
Now, if you've got a school system with old buildings, you can stick computers in them. That seems modern in a way, but when we hear the term 21st century education,
Sure.
What else does there have to be?
There's many things that 21st century education can mean, such as updated textbooks and being plugged in and having supplies and materials for science labs. Many of the schools don't have appropriate materials for all of the students to really engage in a hands-on way for science labs and activities like that. But you think 21st century and it kind of sounds very like grand and very plugged in, and they're going to be ready for the future. But the reality is many schools, the students can't even drink the water in their schools because of old lead pipes. And there's at least 90 schools right now that are using bottled water. I just came in the lobby here, and there's a nice water fountain, and you can put your water bottle up to it and it'll measure when your water bottle's full. BPS students have nothing even close to that, and that's not coming to them anytime soon. So 21st century skills and facilities sound amazing, but there's very basic needs that are also not being met.
Well, the water is bad enough for me in the 20th century, but I want to go to another issue that's maybe even more important, because you've been hearing a lot from parents about teacher diversity.
Sure.
There isn't enough, and I think it's most glaring among Latino students, if I'm not.
Yes, Black and Latino students, yes, yeah. So over the past few months, SchoolFacts Boston has put out information and a communication arc that we're calling 10 challenges. So it's the 10 challenges facing the new BPS superintendent. And one of the challenges that we spent some time researching was around teacher diversity. And when the data and infographic came out and was shared over social media, about how much disparity there is in student representation among their teachers and faculty. A lot of people found those numbers to be alarming, and it's unfortunate that there's not necessarily doesn't seem to be like a plan or pathways for those numbers to shift anytime soon.
Well, over the past decade or so, I have heard about efforts in Boston to increase recruitment or do something about the scheduling to get new people in. But at the same time, I'm also hearing there are problems with the teacher pipeline.
Yeah, there seem to be issues with teacher pipeline, and then also when you talk about bringing in teacher populations for to be more representative for Black and Latino student populations, it's connected to so many other issues and concerns that we have throughout the city, such as affordable housing and other opportunities and ways that the city might not be as welcoming for teachers of color.
Well, what is it like for a parent? Because you might, let's say, I mentioned the example of Latinx parents, but if you have a child in the school system, and why is it important that there be at least in the mix one teacher who has a similar background?
There's a lot of reasons that representation and just kind of being able to see yourself in an experience like that is really important. It's a very humanizing experience. It's a way you can connect with others, and that doesn't mean people can't connect across racial difference, but there is something reinforcing when you can find something in common with somebody, or even a student seeing a teacher of a similar background of their own might even help give them the suggestion that I'm a scholar, I could be a teacher one day too. So that the representation matters on lots of different levels, and including even possible career aspiration for young students.
Well, I know your plan here now with SchoolFacts Boston is to look at about 10 different topics.
Sure.
You're going to sift things out and come up with priorities. So what happens next?
Yeah, so our Family Advisory Board meets and will review topics of things that they're kind of like interested in and things that we've talked about over the past months, and decide which topic we'll go forward with next. So there's parents that are asking questions about when a student is 16 years old, they can disenroll themselves from a school. They can decide for themselves that they no longer want to continue with their education trajectory. And that's a fact that I feel like a lot of people don't know. So what are the questions there as like a potential topic to look into further, or even looking back on the 10 topics that we have currently addressed, like what were some of the spikes in interest, and are there areas where we could potentially dive deeper, such as facilities and budgeting and other issues. So there's many topics on the table, but the Family Advisory Board will vote and decide the best way for the group to go forward.
And of course, if people want to keep track of what you're doing, you've got at least a social media presence that they can
Yes,
look at.
on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we try to keep the conversation pretty active and engaged. If people have questions, we've had parents send in questions about the facilities at their school. After our most recent report, they are asking about the issues with chipping lead paint at their school. Who should they go to? What questions should they be asking? So SchoolFacts Boston very much wants to be a resource for parents, whether it's on the specific topic that we're asking about, or they might have other ideas or concerns as well.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Vernée Wilkinson from SchoolFacts Boston. We'll have more news in just a moment.